So we finally got out to the Carolina Panthers training camp. It's different. And I think that with this video, some of the things that we're going to talk about, some of the things that I'll say is that it's different reading something, talking about a video in which you see, rather than being out there and talking about some of your own observations and some of the things in which I saw from this team. Now, before I get into my notes and observations for today, I think it's safe to say there's two questions about this team right now, at least for me. Two questions that I have when looking at this current depth chart, looking at this team, and looking at where they can improve. Number one, that's the cornerback room. We look at some of the guys in the cornerback room. I think Dante Jackson trying to regain his form, get back on track. I look at J.C. Horn, another guy in that room. And like I said, J.C. Horn is an elite corner in my eyes. Right now, the biggest thing on him is he has to stay healthy. But I think when he's been on the field, he's been a consistent, dominant corner for this team. And he can keep doing that if he continues to stay healthy and get back on the field and play consistent snaps this season. Now, C.J. Henderson, some people are split on C.J. Henderson. And I think that he was that talented guy coming out of Florida. Like we saw, got drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars, got traded, has not performed up to par just yet. But I've seen some solid things out of C.J. Henderson thus far. And like I said, right now, I think it's way too early to tell, and really way too early to swing either way as far as saying we have a problem right here, this is a problem that we need to address, that we need to fix, or saying that this is a problem that is being fixed because of guys performing in training camp. Like I said, we have to see some preseason. We got to see some joint practices. We got to see some game time action before we can take this next step and saying that some of these players are really ready to step up in some of the roles in which we have questions. Now, I want to get into some of the things that I saw for today. And I think that it's going to be different from what a lot of people have been hearing, from what a lot of takes have been. And the first guy I want to start off with is Herb Miller, one of the cornerbacks in this room. I don't know how familiar you Carolina Panther fans are with Herb Miller. He's not a big-time name in this room. But when I saw him on the football field, making consistent pass breakups, getting deflections, different things in 7-on-7 periods, and really this was in the 7-on-7 period. Did not see much of this in team, but he also had good coverage, just not plays on the football. And I think that him being a guy in this room, in this cornerback room, where we look at the depth and we say, whoa, if Dante Jackson gets hurt, if C.J. Henderson gets hurt, if J.C. Horn gets hurt, God forbid, knock on the wood, that is the type of thing that we have to address and that we have to look dead in the eyes and say, okay, who's going to step up? And I think Herb Miller right now in training camp being a guy who's showing some flashes. So like I said, has to stay consistent right now. Got to see some game time action. It's way too early, but a guy I want to put on your radar because I said the depth is important, and I think he could add to it if he continues to perform how he's performing. Now, the next thing I talk about is the pass rush. And that's the pass rush beside Brian Burns. I know when I say pass rush and that this is a need for the team, we're going to say we got Marquise Haynes. We're going to say Yetur Gross-Matos. Some of those guys in the room drafted DJ Johnson. But I think that it's still a need and still some guys who have to show me a couple things on the football field. This season, training camp, preseason, some of the things that I still have to see. And right now, it was one guy who flashed for me. And talking about this guy, I don't know how familiar you guys are with these names, but this is what I saw today, and I could not ignore it. And that's Iku Leota, another guy on the defensive line, one of those hybrid, really edge-type players. And I think that seeing him on the defensive line had wins on one-on-ones, had wins on team periods. Every time I saw him on the football field, I said, who is that guy? Number 46 on that practice field was flashing all day for me. So I'm going to try to get to some film for this guy because I'm not very familiar with Iku Leota. But looking at this guy on the practice field, seeing what he can do, had some nice bend to him, showed some flashes of great athleticism. So him on the edge, is he a rotational piece? What is his role really right here carving out? Is he more on the bubble? Looking at some of the guys in this room, because I think there's a lot of guys in the pass rushing room, in the defensive end room, but how good can they be and how good are they right now? So another thing I saw, this is not pass rush related, but on the interior, we know that Matthew Iodonis is not on the team no more. Brought in Shot Toter from the New Orleans Saints and have him alongside Derek Brown. And when I look at that, I say, okay, that's pretty solid. But one thing I do want to say is that I saw Shot Toter with the win on one-on-ones. You would think that this is something I would never ever be saying, something I would never ever see, but he actually won a pass rush rep in a one-on-one against an offensive lineman. We've seen a lot of shot total football. If you watch film on him so far, we haven't seen a lot of pass rushing. That's a lot of taking on that true double team, is a nose tech, is a one in the defensive line. But right now, I think that's still his role. Although I've seen the pass rush, well, basically the one pass rush win rep, some of the things we can say, but Derek Brown, a guy who can get 40 plus pressures in a given season, did it last year. And I'm expecting at least 5+ sacks this year, because you have to think eventually we keep getting pressure and pressure and pressure. That's going to eventually turn into a sack. So that's one thing I can say about him. Now, another guy, and I've talked about this guy before I even got out here to the Carolina Panthers training camp, Marquand McCall. Now, you wonder, why do some things happen on the defensive line? Why do we do some things here? Why does this really go this way? Marquand McCall is a guy on the defensive line who's made some plays, especially today. Seeing him in the run game, seeing what he can do, I think that he adds that third guy, being a rotational piece. If you need to get Derek Brown out, if you need to get Shy Tuttle out, I think this is a guy, a solid rock on the interior you could depend on. Now, like I said, outside of Derek Brown, you're not getting the pass rush. You're not getting the Chris Jones. You're not getting the Quentin Williams. But I don't think that is what this team is really asking for from these guys. I look at some of the guys on the edge who can kick down into 3 techs, or also you can kick Derek Brown down into the 1. Now you can stun him. Now you can loop him, do those types of things. So it's some versatility there with that room. And speaking about versatility, it does not stop there. When I talk about the defensive formations and the different looks you can get and how you can do different things, I don't think it's really that hard or that simple, because we say 4-2-5, we say 3-3-5, we say all these different defensive fronts. And I think that the consistent theme in what I saw today, especially Jeremy Chin, is going to move around the defense, especially when you have Frankie Louvu. Now, you also brought in Deion Jones, another nice player who we could talk about here. But with Jeremy Chin, he can be a coverage linebacker in a dime package and a nickel package. But today I saw him playing nickel corner, slot corner, the safety, whatever you want to call him, is that third safety on the field, along with Von Bell, along with Xavier Woods. So now understand, when we have those guys in the room, Jeremy Chin can also kick in and be a dominant safety in the room. So I think that the biggest thing is that we know what Ejiro Evero wants to do. I think he wants to stop the run from too high. When I look at some of the things that I saw with the Denver Broncos, a lot of too high shells, a lot of different things, quarter, half, quarter coverages. So now adding that into this team, you got guys who can play the interior, get you some pass rush, but also stop the run with a light box. I think that is the biggest thing with this team. And now we understand we got Frankie Louvu, who can play the linebacker, who can kind of do a little bit of everything. But we also got Shaq Thompson, still a guy who's hanging on. And I think that you see Shaq Thompson, he's been on this team with the good, the bad, the mid, the everything. He's been a consistent part of this team in the linebacker room, but he's still good. And he's really not that old. I think that because we've seen him in so many different eras, it's for me at least, I see Shaq Thompson, I say, God, he's still playing. He's still hanging on, but he's still top 15, bench top 10 linebacker in the game. You look at the stats, you look at the film, that's consistent with that take. Now, another thing in which I saw, Ikem Ekwonu, I think doesn't need an introduction, doesn't need a lot of things to talk about, but he was a guy that I saw on the offensive line who was just dominant. In one-on-ones, they had a 2-on-2 stunt drill working with those guys. You can't beat Ikem. You can't beat Ikem Ekwonu. With a straight face, no laughs, no jokes, I think he's poised for a breakout season. This is a guy who was also kind of close to home, played ball at NC State, went into the NFL top 10 draft pick, and seeing him now, his growth. We knew that Ikem Ekwonu was a mauler in the run game. I think that's why the Carolina Panthers were so attracted to this guy, looking at kind of the theme and philosophy. Now, will that philosophy be carried on with Bryce Young in this room, with Thomas Brown, some of the new additions, some of the kinks and works in this team? But I think that consistently, we've seen the past few years, they've been running the football. So Ikem Ekwonu has been a big part of that, but working on his pass blocking, and he's been consistently working on that. So now getting better in that aspect, already dominating the run game. I think a guy who can be one of the best tackles in football. Now, there's some really good ones out there right now, and it's hard to say, I don't think you're looking for the best tackle in football. As long as you got a top 10 to 5 guy year in and year out, which I think he can be, which I think he's kind of close to right now, you feel pretty good about that. And also adding to the fact, this is a solid offensive line across the room, getting some guys back. Austin Corbett, a guy who we're keeping our eye on. But I think overall, this team feels good about the offensive line. Now, one thing I will say, no Bryce Young interceptions. One thing that I noted today, and I really paid attention to what Frank Reich talked about, because what I wrote down is different mindset from Bryce Young. And when I say different mindset from Bryce Young, that's saying that we're going to understand when to pull those levers, when to pull those triggers. And if I want to fit this window right here, if I want to throw this ball right here, we're going to do that. But in certain situations, even if it's the red zone, even if it's 2 minutes, if I don't trust it, if I know it can get me in trouble, I'm not doing it. And when Frank Reich described one of the interceptions that Bryce Young had earlier, he said, that's on me. That's something that I told the guy to do, and take your shot when in 2 minutes, take your shot when in the red zone, those types of things, because what you really have to lose, and you think that, okay, it's all good. We get an interception, a turnover here, we gamble with that. If we lose that gamble, we live with it and sleep with that at night. But understanding that can go terribly wrong. So sometimes in those situations, you want to take the shot, but not always taking the shot. And like I said, he was a calculated risk taker. I don't think he had really any turnover-worthy plays today, but understanding when to drive the football down the field, when to throw into the intermediate, when to throw into the deep passes, I think this was something that I saw and kind of an improvement. Now, it wasn't the best day for Bryce. Had, hit high on some throws, missed some throws. But really, overall, I think that this is a guy who's consistently getting better, consistently showing those flashes, and why he was the number 1 pick in the draft. I feel good about saying that. Like I said, he had some misses, but don't let that take away from the fact that this is a guy who still had a great day. We see Bryce Young miss 2 or 3 balls, and he misses a ball in the red zone, or he hits Tommy Tremble and throws it too high. We see that, and for a regular quarterback, we say, okay, that's typical. You're not going to make every throw. But for Bryce Young, I think that when he had those early misses, those 2 or 3 misses I talked about, he shook back. The ball did not hit the ground a lot in the second half of practice, in those team periods, in those 7-on-7s. So one thing I will say I see from this guy is that if something goes bad, if something wrong happens, it's a coverage sack, the offensive line doesn't block like he wants them to, the pass protection fails him in a certain play, I think that he still comes back and still has the mindset of, okay, we flush it, short-term memory, I'm back at it, I'm still that guy. And I talked about Frank Reich's 5 things which make a great quarterback. We see those 5 things in action. They're clicking every snap, every play, how he commands the huddle, how he has that X factor, how he has that footwork, the accuracy within the pocket. And I think the biggest thing that I saw today out of Bryce Young, outside of the typical throws, outside of reading coverages, having timing, the biggest thing that I saw was improvising. Now, I understand it's practice. We cannot hit the quarterback right now. So some of the plays we saw would have been sacks. Can't hit them. We got to come up and not tackle him when we get to the sack point. But understanding that he still has great pocket mobility and he still improvised on some of those plays, because we can say, okay, I came up right here. I did not sack you, but I would have sacked you in a real game. But can we really say that all the time? Because he's made some guys miss in college football. He's had some guys who have had hands on him, who have beat the offensive lineman, but they still could not get the sack because they had hands on him and did not bring him down. Broke the tackle, got away from him outside of the scramble marks. So different things that we can expect from Bryce Young. It's not always going to be a sack. Even if a guy comes free, he still has the opportunity and ability to make them miss because we've seen his skill set. I think that's something we all know he can do. One of the reasons why he was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Now, a different thing that I want to talk about, and really getting into this running back room before we get out of here. Raheem Blackshear. I think that we know Miles Sanders, this is his room right now, understanding that this was a guy who was brought in free agency. He's came here from Philadelphia, had over 1,000 yards last season. He's leading the room right now. It's safe to say that, barring health, he will be the guy who gets a lot of snaps, catches the football, runs the football for his team, along with Chuba Hubbard. But a guy that I saw was Raheem Blackshear. I saw these other running backs. They were all on the field, but when I saw number 3 on that football field, something was different. And we say, what is different? What does that even mean? And I think that it's no quantifying it. It's no real explaining about what we see and what is really different. But when I saw him on the football field, he flashed. Agility, athleticism, caught the football a little bit, hitting the right gaps, having the vision, being patient, knowing when to press the pocket, press the line of scrimmage. Different things that we saw from Raheem Blackshear. Had an overall solid day. Like I said, it's too early to jump one way or another, say he's great, say he's bad, say he's in the middle. Too early for all of that. But I want to see some more of that consistency. Give him these opportunities, although it's a running back room who kind of has some name value, who has some guys who've been there, done that. And another thing that I saw, like I said, one more thing, Laviska Shenault lined up at running back. I think that we know at this point he's kind of that gadget guy in the offense, and understanding how many teams have, especially with Thomas Brown. I think that looking at the offense in which he comes from, he's a Sean McVay influence. Understanding how they've used some of those guys. They've had some slot guys, whether it be Robert Woods, which Sean McVay has worked with, whether it be Cooper Kupp, who he's most recently worked with. I think that they always have a guy who can do different things. And, looking at this team, Shi Smith can do some different things. Jonathan Mingo can do some different things. But Laviska Shenault being lined up in the backfield, a true running back. This is not a motion. This is not anything. He was lined up beside Bryce Young before the ball was snapped. Just a wrinkle in the offense that I like to see, something good. Also has some big-time catches. Number 5, trying to redeem himself after being a high draft pick. Has not truly lived up to that value just yet. But I think that if he continues to get opportunities, along with Terrace Marshall Jr., along with Jonathan Mingo, DJ Chark, Adam Thielen, the more I talk about it, I see that it's kind of some names. It's some real competition. So we look at some of the guys behind them. They're going to be on the bubble. But let me know what you think about these observations. Do you feel that if I put you on the radar about any players who you have not heard about yet? Like I said, hearing about Iku Luoda, hearing about Raheem Blackshear, some of these different players. I've saw these guys, and when I say I see it in person, it looks a little bit different than some of the other guys. So like I said, these are today's observations. We'll be back at it tomorrow morning, going out there to the practice, checking out this team, seeing what's going on. And like I said, if I think that I see the same observations, I still see Iku Luoda. I still see him doing some of those same things off of the edge. I still see Raheem Blackshear doing some of those same things off the edge. We're going to talk about it, because the biggest thing is stacking those days. That's one thing to have a good practice. It's one thing to have a bad practice. But like I said, we swing it either way. If you're continuously having bad practices, if you're continuously having good practices, then we can make a take about you. Then we can start to say, okay, I got to feel about this guy. But I'm going to leave you with that thought for today. Thank you for watching today's episode. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on the video if you've made it this far. Real observations for the Carolina Panthers training camp is different when you see it in person than when you read it on the laptop, you read it on the computer. I saw some things today, and I left amazed.